What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to the show. It's Friday, June 24th, 2011. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. It's Pauhana Friday, end of the week, and after the radio show, I'm going to just take a deep breath and relax and go fix a friend's computer. So, not much of a Pauhana here. Obviously, phone lines are open, 877-342-6673, 877-342-6673. Brett's in the control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, answering your phone calls. Second hour of today's show, Tracey Long, attorney, expert on foreclosure, will be joining us to talk about the current developments in Foreclosure Gate. Recent court ruling basically saying that the mortgage electronic registration system does not actually have standing to foreclose on property or to assign that authorization to anybody else unless they're in possession of the note. And the whole idea of MERS is that it disconnected the mortgage from the actual note, and thus this huge amount of confusion. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. Paul from Poker Face will be with us next Wednesday, so that'll be something to look forward to. We're starting to book a lot more guests here into the show. Before we get into my regular talking points list, I want to talk about something we heard just now on the news broadcast, where they talk about the United States House of Representatives, the finest government that money can buy, where they overwhelmingly rejected this symbolic measure, meaning it doesn't have any real effect one way or the other, but it was a symbolic measure basically authorizing an additional year's worth of combat in Libya, sort of trying to retroactively legalize Obama's illegal operations there in Libya, because this is a violation of the War Powers Act. So they defeated that, and I'm sure they're going to go out and tell their constituents, yes, I voted to defeat this symbolic measure that would have done absolutely nothing. Please vote for me again. But then they turn around and they fail to pass a resolution that would have actually cut the funding for the operation in Libya. So here we have a classic example of politics in an election year. They're going to defeat the completely pointless legislation that is up there so that they can just say, I voted against this legislation. But when it comes right down to the rubber meeting the road or the tank tread meeting the dead Muslim, they're basically saying, yeah, go on with the war and so forth and so on. So it's basically the House of Representatives is doing what they've always done. They're grandstanding, they're trying to look good for the voters, and then they let the president do whatever he wants to do. Now, speaking of shenanigans in the legislature down in Texas, remember we had this anti-groping bill for the TSA that was being proposed, and then Governor Perry said, no, you can't do that, I will veto, and huge hue and cry. And Governor Perry, of course, is rumored to be considering a presidential run next year. So he decides to basically bring the measure back into this special session of the Texas legislature. Everybody's saying, huzzah, huzzah, Perry is standing up for the people, and they're already printing up the little stickers for his campaign. It turns out that the way the bill was written is not following all the correct forms. The I's are not dotted, the T's are not crossed, and the Speaker of the House of the Texas Legislature basically said, we're not going to bring it to the floor because it's illegal the way it was written. And apparently a lot of Texas legislators didn't even want to vote on this thing one way or the other, didn't even show up. I don't even know if they had a quorum down there. So the bill, unfortunately, is dead. The TSA is still able to run around saying all your crotch are belong to us, and Governor Perry will go into next year's campaign saying, I tried to stop the TSA. Well, you know something? We're not going to be voting on the basis of trying and hope and wishful thinking. The people who actually accomplish some good get our votes, and everybody else is going to get shown the door. So, and it is. We're going to see a lot of grandstanding and a lot of, it's theater. It's theater. They're going to set a stage and they're going to come out and they're just going to say their lines and say, see, I love the people. And then when it comes right down to it, business will go back, to basically being the way it always has been. Now, getting into the economy real quick. Up in New York, somebody did the calculation. There are so many homes in foreclosure or about to go into foreclosure that it will take 62 years to clean up the backlog. 62 years. A lot of these older people in their homes, they don't have to worry. By the time the foreclosure shows up, they're going to be dead. Now, Ron Paul, who is also, of course, getting ready to run for president again next year, is back to his agenda to have the people's gold reserves examined, audited, and assayed. As you know, there has been a huge scandal all over Europe where gold bullion bars bearing the hallmarks of Fort Knox are turning out to have tungsten cores. And it has long been rumored that there isn't much left of the people's gold in Fort Knox because it's been just taken over by the Federal Reserve. And who knows where it's going from there. But you need to understand something. That gold in Fort Knox belongs to you, the people. It is supposed to be there for the benefit of the nation as a whole, not just for the bankers. The gold really is supposed to have been kept in Fort Knox because it's already pledged as collateral. They can't just take it out of there and spend it because then they're in violation of the government loan agreements up to the Nixon administration, which is when they ran out of gold to collateralize the loans and said, okay, we're going to have to collateralize with the wilderness areas and the roadless zones and the wetlands and all the other stuff the EPA has been grabbing to pledge as collateral here. And so now we're getting these stories about gold bars floating around, which appear to have the hallmarks of Fort Knox, and they've got tungsten cores. And so Ron Paul legitimately has a question. We want to go into Fort Knox with an ultrasound machine. We want to start checking the gold bars to see if there is a bimetallic boundary inside that sonogram, which will tell us non-destructively if there's a tungsten core inside that gold bar. Because that means that somebody somewhere, either in the government or the Federal Reserve, has been playing the same dirty trick with the gold bars that they played with your silver coinage back in 1964. We're just going to take that messy, tarnishy, stinky silver out of your coins, and we're going to give you these clad copper slugs, but trust us, it's just as good. It's real money. And of course, no, it isn't. Because when the United States of America was first founded, the money is measured in silver and gold. The word dollar is defined as a weight measure of silver that is found in the silver dollar. The actual silver dollar is a little bit heavier than that because there are additional metals added for durability. But that is the legal dollar, a weight measure of silver. And the gold dollar is the equivalent weight in gold that would reach the same value. And that is what the American monetary system was supposed to be. And only under the duress of the Federal Reserve has the silver been taken away from you and replaced with these clad slugs that we're using right now, which do not retain their value. The value of the money is under the control of the bankers with that system. When the money was based on silver and gold, the value of the money was in your hands. There was nothing the government or the bankers could do to make the money you're holding worth any less. That was then, this is now, just by turning on that printing press. Ben Voldemort can magically take buying power out of your pocket, out of your wallet, out of your bank account, and put it in his own and his cronies. So that's why Ron Paul wants to look at those gold reserves, because if those bars are all fake, then somebody somewhere has done in real life what Goldfinger tried to do in that James Bond movie. They're basically ripping off Fort Knox. Somebody's actually done it. And Ron Paul wants to go in and find out to what extent the people have been robbed. Now, if you are like me, and you are wondering just why it is that, with the exception of Bernie Madoff, who cheated a lot of his fellow Jewish people, that's why he got thrown in jail. But if you're looking at all these other people in this mortgage-backed security fraud, the biggest financial swindle in history, and none of them have gone to jail, none of them have handcuffs, none of them have had the day in court or the perp walk, they've just been allowed to go. And why are they not being arrested? And originally we were told by the U.S. government, well, the blame goes in so many directions, and it's a systemic fault, and, thousands of people were working collectively at fault, and it wouldn't be fair to single anybody else for prosecution. That's been their excuse up to now. Now, here it is. The statute of limitations has expired on these financial crimes. They're never, ever going to be arrested or go to jail. They got away with it. They wrecked the economy, they looted the American people, they put trillions of dollars in their own pockets, and they got away with it clean. Because the U.S. government let them. And now the statute of limitations has expired. And they're having parties all over the place. Yes, I'm going to buy another $200,000 watch for my wrist. I'll have 2 watches on there so that 2 people can read the time at the same time. My brother Matthew sent me a couple of juxtaposed stories. I have not had a chance to put them up at whatreallyhappened.com yet, but it basically shows how this mortgage company CEO got convicted for fraud. And he's gone to $3 billion he took from people, and he went to jail for 40 months, which is significant. And then there's this homeless guy who stole $100 who got a 15-year sentence. So don't tell me that being rich does not buy you special justice. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So in the midst of all this, dodging the debt ceiling and not being able to make payments and looting various pensions and Social Security and all the rest of that to try and pay the bills, it probably does not come as much as of a surprise that Geithner has basically come out saying that taxes on small business must rise, or we face the possibility that government might shrink. Like that's a bad thing. And I'm sure for people who are in government, yeah, shrinking government's a bad thing. Where am I going to find work for my nieces and nephews if the government starts shrinking here? But, Geithner seems to, not understand that small business in America right now is the small business is the primary creator of new jobs in this country right now. The big corporations have sent their jobs to other countries. It's small business, small mom-and-pop businesses, small-scale manufacturing that are creating what new jobs are out there. And Geithner wants to hit them with more taxes so they won't be able to hire as many people. In fact, most small businesses are already on the edge. An increase in taxes will start crushing them out of existence. So I'm sure Geithner thinks this sounds really cool, but he's not thought it all the way through, which seems to be the hallmark of American government these days. But I think that I speak for the vast majority of my listeners out there when I say that I think it would be much better to have lower taxes on the American people and a government that shrinks a lot, starting with the TSA, the IRS, and the Department of Let's Go Around the World Killing Brown People. Government is already way too big. Government consumes something like more than half of the economic productivity of the nation. Something like 25% to 30% of the population are involved with the government in some function or other at some level. That's a huge, huge cash sink. All the money going in there and nothing of any positive benefit coming out. Now, accepted business practice both in the United States and in Asia is that management of a company should never exceed more than 10% of its workforce or its operating capital. Actually, that's more Asia than the United States. The United States, top management absorbs all the available capital. But in Asia, in the very successful economies over there, management is held to just 10%. I think that's a reasonable rate, and I think that's what we should have in the United States of America. Government should not absorb more than 10% of the population, and 10% of the available cash flow. That is a mature republic, as opposed to a fascist economic dictatorship. But government is way too big. It's coming into our homes and telling us what light bulbs we should use. That's a government that's bloated beyond all reasonableness. You know what? If we gave up this psychotic necessity to go around the world murdering brown people, we could shut down the Department of Murdering Brown People, and we could cut taxes to the American people by 50% across the board and not touch any other government programs at all. And the American economy would light up. People would have money in their pockets. They'd go back to the stores. They'd start buying. The entire economy would start moving again. As long as the government goes on trying to solve all their problems by borrowing more money and shackling the American people to the payments, the economy cannot recover. And they know that this is the way it is. They're just out to put money in their own pocket, and they don't care what happens to you because you don't count. You're just there to breed soldiers and do as you're told. All right, we're going to go to the phones. We've got Chris. I'm not sure. Chris, where are you calling from?
Worcester, Massachusetts.
Oh, I was born in Boston. Aloha, Massachusetts. What's on your mind?
No, I just wanted to commend you on your pronunciation the other day at Worcester State College when you caught the cops coming out of the cafeteria.
Yeah?
Oh, no, I love your program. Your website woke me up in 2003, right before the war. I just had a question why that murdering scumbag hood named Whitey Bulger was such a distraction this week. Looks like the FBI is doing a little cleaning up with Osama bin Laden guy 2 months ago, and now Whitey's off the list now too. So,
well, they're trying to basically they're getting rid of all the old phonies so they can come out with a brand new, fresh set of phonies that we have not assembled the evidence to prove that they are phonies, like the new Al Qaeda number 2, whatever the heck his name is. Although he was reported killed back in 2006, they're basically polishing up the image.
Rocky, right? The other. Rocky.
Yeah, that guy. And
all right, it was great to talk to you, Mike. I've been listening to you forever. And, the last couple of years, and I'm glad I got through, and I'll talk to you later.
Well, thank you very much for the phone call. Thank you very much indeed.
I'll keep listening.
Please do, and tell all your friends. Thank you very much. Right now we're seeing as the government pushes for more war, they're having to basically go back and clean up a lot of these propaganda problems where they were lying to us, and we knew they were lying to us, and now they're getting rid of the old phonies, and they're just to clear the stage for a new set of phonies. It's a recasting. It's the sequel. It's Trick You into War with a Nation That Begins with I, Volume 2. So, anyway, and speaking of tricking us into more and more war, as you are probably aware, Vietnam and China are having this little bit of kerfuffle over the Spratly Islands. And if you look at the Spratlys through Google Earth, there isn't much to them at all. And yes, there are rumored oil and gas deposits under them, but there are really oil and gas deposits in a lot of different places that you shouldn't have to fight over. But this is just territorial dispute, and now the U.S. is going to wade in. Because apparently the Philippines are seen as being involved in the Spratly Islands dispute, and the U.S. is now going to spend more of your money that it doesn't have to go out and arm the Philippines against China. This may be the opening gambit to get the U.S. into a war with China. Why? Because if the U.S. is able to get into a war with China, they can say, we don't have to pay you back any of the money we borrowed from you, because we're at war now. And in war, all's fair, even more so than in love. And another classic case of trying to use war to get out of the financial messes they have created for themselves. And they're willing to trade your kids to balance the books. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And obviously, a lot of people are very worried about the continuing escalation of the flooding in the Midwest, all down the Missouri River, getting into the Mississippi River. The floodwaters are already something like 2 feet above what was considered to be the maximum level of flooding predicted by the Army Corps of Engineers, and there does seem to be much more on the way because the real big spring melt, actually summer melt, of last year's record snowpack is just now beginning. So there's a lot more on the way. It's a very horrendous situation. Our flood control, like so much else in the country, has just been completely neglected, because they had to go spend the money on Wall Street and war and Israel, and you serfs, you're just going to have to, take care of yourselves here. We're too busy reshaping the world, make it safe for private central banking to be bothered with things like roads and schools and flood control and bridges and stuff like this. So it's breaking new records down there. It's already higher than the 1993 floods, which were really, really bad. We understand that the grounds of the Fort Calhoun nuclear power plant are already flooded. The aqua dam and the sandbags and all the rest of that did not work. There's a couple of feet of water all around the building. They're still insisting that the internal machinery of the power station has been protected, and that power is still coming in for the spent fuel rod cooling pumps. But the water is going to continue to rise. And with all that water on the ground, it could be subsidence, all kinds of things. They should, instead of trying to reassure us that everything's going to be just hunky-dory, they ought to be preparing for the worst-case scenario. Because had Japan been prepared for the worst-case scenario at Fukushima, I don't know that it would be as bad as it has been. I think a huge part of the problems in the aftermath of Fukushima, including the skyrocketing suicide rate over there in Japan, is because they really weren't prepared. They were listening to a lot of wishful thinking. We're finding out now that the Nuclear Regulatory Agency here in the United States of America has been fudging the safety limits, changing the requirements to allow these power stations to operate longer and generate more profits for their owners. And now we're finding out that they were all running right on the ragged edge, same as the situation in Fukushima. And people are very worried, especially about these two, Fort Calhoun and Cooper. We need to keep an eye on that. All right, we're going to go to the phones. We've got Bob from Brooklyn. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Okay, simple. You were mentioning about Red China and everything, with the islands and everything. Well, last week, I had a really horrible idea. How would the Chinese invade us? After all, we're in debt up to our throats to them, and they're pissed at us. Let's face it. Get on the container ships.
They wouldn't invade. All they have to do is call in the loans.
No. Hold the city for ransom. The container ships. Look at those giant container ships. How many men and equipment could they put on one of those things one day?
They could put a nuclear weapon in one of those containers. And here's the thing: the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Napolitano, just said we're not going to bother X-raying those containers anymore. Yeah, the TSA is going to go on grabbing your crotches at the airports, but they're not worried about anything coming in from the border from Mexico, and they're not going to be doing any more security checks on the container ships.
I read today that 2 truckloads of Mexican soldiers went across the border quietly.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And we've got that whole thing with the TSA's been giving the drug criminals guns down there. And nobody's sure, is it simply another Iran-Contra where the CIA's involved in drug running and they're getting guns for their buddies down there? Or was this supposed to create a huge false flag situation where Obama could say, well, we've got to stop guns coming in from, the American people, and we've got to take their guns away. We're not really sure, except that obviously the official story doesn't make sense.
Yeah, insanity is ruling. It's obvious.
It really is.
It was just a thought, and God forbid that this happens, but I could see this maybe happening, holding a city, one of our cities, for ransom until we pay them. Why not?
Well, I think it's very, very possible. I have long held that I think one of the reasons...
Ships, how many men they could put in?
Yeah, I can see that, but, they'd arrive dead. There's no ventilation and there's no waste disposal in those countries.
Mike, come on! The Chinese are very inventive.
I know they're very inventive. My father's from Shanghai. But listen, I'm going to let you go here. Thanks a lot, Bob, from Brooklyn. Yeah, you wouldn't need soldiers in the ship. All you got to do is put a nuclear weapon inside one of those. DHS isn't searching for them anymore. I mean, I'm still thinking that one of the major reasons the United States government can never refuse Israel anything is that Israel has nuclear weapons inside the United States of America. And all they do is say, if you don't do what we want, Chicago's going to vanish or New York's going to vanish. We know that the Israeli consulate in New York is a radioactive hotspot. Nest has documented many, many times, but of course Israel will not allow inspectors in to find out what it is that's so radioactive inside that building. And we know that Israel got the fissionables for their first round of nuclear weapons from sources here inside the United States of America, including the Savannah River plant. And so once you've got the fissionables, making a bomb is really very easy. And so Israel's already got some atomic materials under the control inside the United States of America. They don't need to smuggle them out to Israel, build a bomb, and smuggle the bomb back. They just build the bomb right here. And then they can go to the president and say, look, your hometown's going to disappear in a blinding flash of light if you don't keep that money coming from the American taxpayers over to Israel. Forget about building roads here in the United States of America. We need brand new Jews-only roads in the occupied territories, and you're going to pay to build them. And by golly, that is exactly what happened. All right, back to the phones here. We've got Ben in Nebraska. Aloha, Ben. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I noticed yesterday you were talking about changing the national anthem to Send in the Clowns.
Yes.
Well, I actually have maybe an alternative to that. Change the Star-Spangled Banner to a field recording of bleating sheep.
That's a good idea. That's not bad.
Weekend, Mike.
That's not bad at all.
And with that, you like that?
I loved it.
Well, anyway, have a good weekend, and it's Ben signing off. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, and have a good weekend yourself. We'll see you back here on Monday. We're going to switch over to Vince in Montana. Aloha, Vince. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Aloha. Just going to give you the report from on the flood, the headwaters.
Oh, please do.
The flooding has started up in Montana. The Yellowstone is at full pool. In fact, today it hit the second highest level in the last 100 years.
Oh, boy.
So it is finally, the melt has finally started on both the upper Missouri tributaries and the Yellowstone. That's the problem that this causes is the Yellowstone is the second biggest river in Montana, but it doesn't dump into Fort Peck. It dumps in below Fort Peck at Garrison. So the dam that everybody needs to be concerned about, all of the
Garrison Dam.
Full runoff is coming out of Fort Peck, plus it's getting hit with a full pool flood from the Yellowstone at Garrison Dam in North Dakota.
Yeah, I've heard other people already expressing concern over that dam is already stretched to the maximum limits, and everybody's very, very nervous about this.
Hit. It's taken the big load. So that's the one that's got to be watched. But 2 days of 85-degree temperatures is all it took up here, and this thing is full tilt boogieing. So.
Oh man, that is something. If you get any pictures, please email them in. I want to put them up there.
Yeah,
Yellowstone
I can email you
gorgeous
pictures.
All right, Vince, we gotta take a break. Thank you very much. We'll be right back.
All right.
We will not go down in the night without a fight. You can burn up our mosques and our homes and our schools, but our spirit will never die. We will not go down in Gaza tonight.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And, obviously the news is not good coming from the headwaters up there in Montana. Yellowstone is a beautiful place, by the way. If you have never seen Yellowstone, obviously wait till the flooding is over. But if you've never been to Yellowstone, that should be on your bucket list. It really, it's amazing. There's no other place on earth like it. We're close down here on our big island, but Yellowstone's really amazing here. The part that really angers me and should anger you, I was at lunch today with my lovely wife, Claire, and just sitting there, I got hit with about 6 spam emails in a row, all of them basically shoving this latest writing by Al Gore. He got this into Rolling Stone magazine. I guess he called it a chip. And the whole point of the screed is you're all in denial, saying the world is getting colder. It's getting warmer. Man, bear, pig is out there with his giant cosmic butane lighter, and he's heating the planet. And you've got to give me your money and do what we tell you. And basically this is money junkyism on display. Because Al Gore and his investors have already invested a couple of $100 million in putting out this idea that the world is getting warmer and that's your fault and you've got to atone for it. And they've had 3 harsh winters in a row, and we have record flooding because we had record snow last winter. And the reason the record snow has led to record flooding is really very simple. When the snow was coming down heavily all over the northern hemisphere, and people said, boy, we're going to have a problem in the spring with the flooding. And all these government agencies said, no, we won't. No, we won't. The global warming, this snow isn't going to last. It'll be gone almost immediately. Remember, 8 years ago, Hadley CRU in Britain, which is at the center of the whole Climate Gate, Hide the Decline scandal, they were putting out in the newspaper, snow will be gone in our children's children won't even know what snow is going to be. That kind of stuff. And so here we are, we have the money junkies and talk about unrepentant for the sins of the past. Because Al Gore is so hungry for his profits on his investment. He doesn't care what happens to people. He doesn't care about the people who are losing their homes to flooding because the flood control was neglected by local jurisdictions and the federal government wanting to go along with this global warming hoax. And that's exactly what it is. Look at the damage this whole fraud has done to America and to the world, and they're still coming back again and saying, oh, yes, it's true. Trust us. Forget what you're seeing with your own eyes. Look at these pretty printed pieces of paper, these graphs and charts. We hired hundreds of scientists to make it look like the planet's getting warmer. So just because it's colder where you are, who are you going to trust? I'm the former vice president. And these are all scientists with big degrees, and I've got a Nobel Prize and an Academy Award. How can you even think that I'm not telling you the truth? And it's just absolute money junkyism. He wants his money. He wants your money is what he wants. He wants the carbon tax, and he wants to be able to basically enronize the carbon credits to make himself fabulously rich, and he doesn't care how much damage he causes to society as a whole. And what is really very angry, and again, hundreds of millions of dollars they've paid on this thing. Over at the United Nations, they just came out with this report saying that with adequate government subsidies, we can have renewable energy in just a few years. 80% of our energy can be completely renewable with subsidies. And then we find out the IPCC did not base this on any kind of scientific analysis. They basically relied on the industry lobbyists to say, yeah, give them more of the tax money. They'll fix all the problems, and they haven't yet. We have this huge wind farm on the north part of Oahu. Hugely expensive, heavily subsidized. And when the wind blows too hard, they have to shut it down or it'll be damaged. That's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. A windmill farm that has to be shut down when the wind is blowing. There are windmill farms built at heavy government taxpayer subsidy up in Britain that don't operate at all because they were built in places that don't have any wind. But somebody wanted the tax credit. Oh, I've got 2 acres over here I'm not doing anything with. I can't grow anything on it. It's already been completely destroyed by genetically modified crops. Let's put some windmills on there. And they put them up and they get their tax subsidy and their credit, and they're not generating electricity. Huge scandal a couple of years ago. Talk about not wanting to pay attention to what's going on with the freezing weather. They built all these windmills all over Britain to generate electricity, and then they discovered in the winter they were freezing. And they had to put electrical heaters on them to keep them from freezing, to keep them running. And it turned out the electrical heaters were using more electricity than the windmills were actually generating. They'd never think this stuff through. It's all about selling you a new idea, a new buzzword, a new feeling, just so they can get your money and your obedience, and that's what's going on. And I'm watching this spam email come into my mailbox with Al Gore's latest article in Rolling Stone, and nobody seems to have the courage to stand up to him and say, this is nonsense. Yes, climate changes. It's always changed. There has never been a time in the history of planet Earth when the climate was not changing. That is the natural order of things. And the global warming fanatics, the global warming cult, blew the call. And they didn't want to admit it, which is where that whole hide the decline thing came along. And now when it's become obvious to everybody that we have had these 3 harsh winters in a row. Did I mention it snowed here in Hawaii a couple of weeks ago? It snowed in Colorado the day before the summer solstice. Wake up and smell the ice crystals. They blew the call. They were completely wrong. All of their predictions just over the span of a couple of years were completely wrong. Why should we listen to them about warnings for 100 years from now that it's going to be warmer? They can't predict what's going to happen in 1 year. Why do we listen to them about what's going to happen in 100 years? It's all about grabbing the money from you. And that gets back to that thing with the United Nations, because it turns out these industry lobbyists simply went up to the IPCC that's run by the train driver, Pachuri, I think his name is. That's his, he's a railroad engineer. He drives the choo-choo train. And now he's in charge of the United Nations, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And he's already been caught up to his neck in corruption all over the place. His own businesses are tied in with making money off of off of the illusion of human-caused global warming. And now all these alternative energy companies are leaping in, and the IPCC is saying, yeah, let's get you a whole bunch of money from the taxpayers. And none of it works. All of these ideas have fallen flat on their face, whether it's ethanol or the batteries for the electric car or the windmills that have to be shut off when the wind is blowing. It's all harebrained stuff. And now the darling of the green environmental movement, fission power, is cratering. And I get very, very angry that money junkies, when their plans start to fall flat on their face, when it turns out they were wrong, they can't admit it. Because being right or wrong isn't the issue. Grabbing the money is. And that's what Al Gore is talking about. You know, he wants the money. And he doesn't care what reality is. He's trying to sell you one more time. Please give me your money. That's why I say, don't be bowled by a Gore. When it comes to ClimateGate, don't be bowled by a Gore. We're going to go to the phones. We've got Clarence in Oklahoma. Osseo, Clarence, sorry to keep you waiting. What's on your mind today?
No, that's okay. No problem there. Aloha. I just kind of And I listened for a while, and I have to kind of form my what I want to say. And when I want to vent, I'm going to vent because I can see what they're doing, and I have I would say, well, I don't know how I would characterize my career with the U.S. of A federal government. I'm retired from them, yeah, and I get a check. Yeah, big deal. They kept me down in grade because I won't even go into it. All I'll tell you is that they're lying to everybody. They not only lie to you and people that aren't in the government or work for the government, they lie to their own employees.
Oh, they lie to everybody. I mean, Al Gore's been running around screaming the oceans are going to rise from global warming. He just bought a beachfront mansion. He obviously doesn't think the ocean's going to rise all that much.
Well, I'll tell you what the deal is here. This whole deal, this whole fiction. When I hired, you see, they made when I hired in, there are agreements made. Senior con. You're supposed to say, if you'll work 30 years for us, or 35, which I unfortunately did, well, yeah, we'll send you a check, but we'll try to, then they pass along, the late Cindy says, we're going to check cost of living and make sure that your retirement check doesn't become worthless. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's what they said. Now they're changing the way that's being calculated so they can renege on that deal as well.
Absolutely. They ricky-do numbers, and I hate to say it, I sat there and I got hijacked too by these bastards. And they're doing that. Don't
sugarcoat it like that. Tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, really. And it's not just me. There are people a lot worse off than me. But I think it's just, for one thing, it ain't. Well, it's just if your government's going to do that to you.
Okay, got to come to a conclusion. We're almost at the news break.
To you? So,
yeah, we got to come to a conclusion here.
Okay, well, we're getting here.
We're at the end of the break.
Okay, well, I better let you go ahead then. But I had another thing, but I'll form that and write some notes, and I can call you Monday then.
All right, thanks an awful lot there. We're going to switch real quick to Scott in Wisconsin. Scott, what's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Hey, did you hear about them open up in the United States oil reserves?
Yeah, it's kind of a token move that they did. It's not really going to affect supply, demand, and prices. It's just an election year stunt.
Well, I know, but I heard that with those things running, they could only go 3 months. Is there any truth to that?
You mean the strategic reserves would only power the United States for 3 months, or it would power the military for a little bit longer?
Well, I mean, the oil reserves are only mandated for 3 months in them.
Yeah, that's about right. But what they're going to release, it really isn't all that much. It's just a tiny fraction. It's a political move.
Right. And I just wanted to say, Mike, North China underwater? Did you see Manila is underwater too?
Yeah, they had record snow, and now they're dealing with record floods. It's all over the northern hemisphere.
Yeah, well, Al Gore's going to have his time down the road. So, okay, Michael, thank you for taking my call in a short time, and you keep it up, brother.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for commercials and news, and we will be right back in about 8 minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show for hour number 2. And joining us on the telephone now is Tracey Long, a foreclosure expert. We've had him on our show before when we were with the other network. I think this is the first time we've had you since joining the Rents Radio Network, so you've got a whole new audience out there. And Tracey, just based in general, what's the latest developments along the whole foreclosure crisis?
Well, there's been a recent ruling up in New York on MERS's ability to assign the note and the mortgage. I think that's kind of filtered down to some of the other states, and there was a recent decision down in Texas, or rather Florida, regarding injunctions that you can get against mortgage-backed securities. And I have high hopes that these cases are going to help the homeowner.
Well, I certainly hope so. I mean, the homeowners need help, and our government has absolutely abandoned them. I remember listening to the hearings on the whole foreclosure crisis, and I think it was Damon Slivers. Basically, he put it bluntly. He said, we can either deal reasonably with the foreclosure crisis, or we can preserve the capital structure of the banks. We can't do both. Which shall we do? And obviously, in the intervening time, it's become very obvious that the federal government's priority is to preserve the capital structure of the banks, and in a way, all of this foreclosure nonsense, especially the very underhanded way where a lot of it is being done, amounts to nothing more than a very covert form of wealth confiscation to preserve the banks, which is it's a repeat of what Roosevelt did with gold back in 1933, where they confiscated all of Americans' gold to preserve the bank's structure. And the problem is that this time, the way it's being done, most people losing their homes, they think it's their own fault, and they don't understand the very complex machinations that have been undertaken to basically put them in a situation where the banks can take their homes and put them on the balance sheet.
Have you read any of the mass joinder suits that are occurring out in California? Those, I encourage you to read them. They're probably about 50 to 100 pages long, but they really describe in detail how banks have set this up for almost 30 years, riding the bubble up, causing it to pop, going down, and now they're going to start the whole cycle over again. It's very illustrative reading, and I encourage any of your followers to hunt it up on the internet and read it. You'll find it amazing.
Yeah, it's basically it's pump up the value of the household of the house, get everybody on the hook for a mortgage at that inflated value, crash the system, buy the property back for pennies on the dollar, turn around and sell it to your kids and get them on the hook for the mortgages. And when most people realize that when you are done paying off that mortgage, you will give the bankers more money, more of your work than the house itself actually cost, and you begin to understand that it isn't the house that's the thing of value, it's the debt the house creates, because that is the means by which the bankers are able to control your life, by keeping you on that debt. If housing were, like, say, $5,000, if you could buy a house for $5,000 and you could pay it off as fast as you pay off your car, or faster, then you're free and clear of the banks, and they can never allow that to happen. The goal, the design is to keep you working for your entire working life and turning the money over to the banks. That's what this whole system is set up to do, is to shackle you to the bankers for your entire working life. And that is why they've set up a system where the debt always exceeds the available money supply, and the house you live in, you will work your entire life to own it. And now, of course, people who've worked their entire lives to own the house, they don't own it. They come back, they're taking it away. We're being invaded. We are the victims of an invasion. The bankers are invading the country and simply confiscating our homes. They're looting us.
Let me give you a good example. I had a client in this week. I think it illustrates probably what's happened to a lot of people. He had a 30-year mortgage. He's paid 18 years of it off, leaving about 12, 13 years left, and he fell behind. He's in default. So now they want to modify the mortgage, and they want to attach the amount of his arrearage onto the back of it, lengthen it out to 30 more years. So he's going to have an additional 18 years of interest to pay him. So they're going to make back so much more money than what he originally paid. It's just crazy, and he's depressed about it, but he has no other option if he wants to keep the home. And this happens all over America. It happens every day in my practice.
And you realize that when those bankers who are getting more of your labor than the people who actually built and sold you the house, all the bankers did to get that commitment of work from you was paper and ink and computer records. That's all they provided for the equation. Bill over here builds the house and sells it to Bob, and, banker Joe over here gets most of the money from the whole transaction, and he's the only one who isn't working. I mean, does that sound like a reasonable system to me?
Unfortunately, no, it doesn't. That's the system that we're stuck with, and as you so aptly said, finding a way out without ruining the whole economic structure is a problem that everyone faces now.
Well, I think the whole economic structure is on the verge of collapsing anyway, and so trying to find a way to preserve the economic structure while we get the American people out of this horrible manufactured debt obligation, I don't think it's possible. And because there is nothing that we could do to save the economy anyway, I say let's let it collapse. Let's think about the American people first, and I'm sorry the bankers are going to have to learn how to live without a Lamborghini, because we've got to take care of the American people. There is no way to save the economy, not when you have a debt-based currency guaranteeing interest is always in excess of available money. And it really comes down to that.
If they don't raise the debt ceiling soon, everyone's going to be in default, including the American government. So you're going to experience exactly what the homeowners experience.
Well, I'm sure that they will do something to protect themselves, and if nothing else, they'll loot what's left of the gold in the Treasury and head on out to the Cayman Islands. But the reality is we need a new Andrew Jackson. We need an Abraham Lincoln. We need a new John F. Kennedy, somebody who will understand the evils of the private central bank, who's got the moral courage to shut them down and take us back to the financial system that worked for the American people when this nation was founded, which is government issues the currency and spends it into circulation to buy what they need. It circulates through the population to lubricate commerce without accruing interest, then is taxed back at the end of the cycle to balance out the books. And that's the system that worked well for the American people. It's terrible for the bankers. The bankers have basically subverted this nation. They bought this nation from the Congress 3 times now, and all 3 of these things have almost destroyed the nation. And we understand, why do they keep doing it if it's so bad for the people? Well, because they don't care what happens to the people. It puts money in their pocket for nothing more than ink and paper and standing around looking important. And that's what the essence of this whole political economic structure is in the United States of America.
Well, from their perspective, if it's not broke, why fix it?
Oh, it works for them.
Right,
they're chowing down on $200 hamburgers and $120,000 wristwatches, and, they're driving 800,000 Bugattis. They love it the way it is. They don't want to see a single thing change. And so the only ones who are ever going to change this have to be you and I and everybody listening to the show and everybody reading my website, because the powers that be love things the way they are, and they will never, ever, ever change it.
That's the essence of our whole system, Mike, is preservation of the status quo. And anytime someone has a radical idea, they get invited in the door by the status quo, say, come in. Well, we'll change. We'll listen to you. We'll change the thing, what we're doing. But eventually they become part of the system, and it just perpetuates itself. Unless some true radical comes along with strength and enough power to change things, it's going to remain the same, unfortunately.
Well, again, I still think that we are approaching the final crash of the system, and I really do ultimately feel that the U.S. financial system and the government are going to collapse the way the Soviet Union did. We need to start planning about the kind of nation we want to have afterwards. Obviously, no central bank has to be hardwired into the new Constitution, but ultimately, the money junkies have gone as far as they can. They set up a system that is a pyramid. They've set up a system which is doomed to eventually collapse. I think it's here right now. All we can do is decide if we're just going to let ourselves be dragged down into poverty and homelessness and starvation by the bankers, or if we're going to stop throwing good money after bad and just say, you've had enough, go away, and let them collapse without us. It really is that. Go on being made poor, or start to take care of yourself and your family and learn to live without a government and without a bank.
Well, I think you're right, unfortunately.
And, we're really at that point here because, if you really think about it, we could all work ourselves to death and our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and just give all of our money to the government. Live in old feed bags and just give all the money to the government, and it still wouldn't solve the economic problems. And even if by all that sacrifice we somehow paid off some of this manufactured debt from the Federal Reserve, what do we have at the end of it? We still have a government that's terrified of us, that spies on us, that has their uniformed blue shirts putting their hands down the front of our pants to make sure we're not carrying a bomb. What a horrible reward for a lifetime of sacrifice to a government. And I don't think most people are really willing to go along with that deal. Tracy, we got to take a break for commercials. Stay with me. We'll be back in a few minutes. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Tracey Long. And by the way, if you are a person who is in danger of losing your home, if you're trying to fight this fight yourself, you really do need some expert advice, and I would advise you to get in touch with Tracey. And Tracey, I'm going to have you give your phone number and email in a second here. There's also William Shaw is a good resource, and his phone number is 877-347-6112. That's 877-347-6112, and he will get you plugged into the people you need to talk about. Tracey, what's your contact information?
My telephone number is 954-467-8180, and my email address is stl@cloudlegal.com. And Mike, since the last time I spoke to you, I've set up basically a nationwide network so we can help almost anyone who needs help out there.
All right, well, definitely need to have it, because if you're listening to the media and you're listening to the bankers and the mortgage companies and the government, you will be homeless, because the system, the powers that be, the money powers, the money junkies don't care about you. You know, if you're made homeless, they just want to shoo you out of sight so they don't have to look at you. We have that problem going on here on the island of Oahu. We have 4,000 homeless people on this little tiny island, and all the government can do is basically say, stay away from the tourist areas. We can't have the tourists seeing you here. And that seems to be kind of what's going on there. You know, what is interesting, earlier in the show, I don't know if you were listening or not, we were talking about this calculation somebody has done. There are so many homes in New York that are in foreclosure or about to enter foreclosure that at the current rate of the court system, it's going to take 62 years to clear the backlog. And I'm pretty sure we're going to start seeing all kinds of laws being passed to streamline the process and just rubber stamp, you lose your home, you lose your home, you lose your home. Get them over there. We got to get them on the balance sheets to keep the banks solvent.
I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. And the same calculation occurred down here in Florida. It would take 10 years down here in Florida to clear the docket system. But what they're going to do is, right now, in most states, it's still a judicial system where it requires the bankers to go through the court to prove that they're entitled to foreclose. They're going to move to a non-judicial system where they just can't get to take the house, and you have to prove why they shouldn't. So they're going to reverse the burden of proof all around to the homeowner who's already distressed. It's, that's as unconstitutional as it gets.
Well, you know, out here in Hawaii, they passed a law to ban the non-judicial mortgages to try and say, because we got a huge foreclosure problem out here. The courts are already logjammed, and Fannie Mae basically just converted them all from non-judicial to judicial. So the grab is on anyway, and everybody's trying to game the system the way they can. And what nobody is thinking about is how could we put this economy back up on its feet and get money back into the people's hands so they can pay for their homes. And it just seems like this impoverishment of the entire nation. If it isn't intentional, then the bankers and the government simply don't care. They just absolutely do not care about the people. They're not afraid of us. And I don't know why. After Iceland and Egypt and what's going on in Greece and Spain and about to happen over in Great Britain, I don't understand why the bankers and the American government don't understand it could happen here. And yet from their behavior, they seem absolutely convinced that they can go on peeing down your backside and calling it rain, and you will say, thank you, sir, may I have another?
Yeah, unfortunate but true. Mike, have you heard what's going on with the credit reporting agencies lately?
No, tell me.
They've figured out a complex formula that I think only sorcerers can understand to predict whether someone's about to go into strategic default. If you need an explanation of that, I'll tell you. But what they're doing is they're selling this product to bankers, mortgage servicers, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and once they sell that information, the homeowner is tagged as a potential strategic defaultee on purpose. And the banks, loan services, whatever, start harassing them, even threatening them not to go into default. And once you're tagged, you can't apply for another loan for 7 years, whereas if you're just defaulting because you lost your job, it's only 3 years. That is as bad as it gets.
And these homeowners haven't done anything. These homeowners
Right.
haven't done anything. It's just an arbitrary declaration. Oh, we think you might default, therefore you're not going to get a loan for another 7 years. You know one that really
Right.
struck me as absurd? I got a notice from one of our few remaining credit cards the other day where I opened up the envelope and it said, we are adjusting our fees, which, yeah, the greed is definitely running rampant. And they said, if you're late on a payment, we will charge you zigablings of dollars and so forth and so on. I said, I'm insulted because the way this thing is written, first of all, if I had the money to pay the bill, I'd pay the bill. I don't need to be threatened with higher fees for not paying the bill. And second, the fact that they're even waving this threat at us, they think it's by a matter of choice that we're not making the payments. Now, fortunately, we're up to date on that credit card, so it's a big joke from where I'm sitting, but I can understand a lot of other people are looking at this. They're going to get angry because it's very insulting. And, it's like do you remember the old story about the farmer and the horse, where he keeps on whipping the horse to pull harder and harder loads until the horse falls over dead? And then the farmer gets off and said, you stupid horse, how could you do this to me? And the bankers are doing that same thing with the American people. They're pounding on us harder and harder. They're grabbing every penny that they can. And when the whole shebang collapses, they're going to say, what's wrong with you, sirs? You're supposed to continuously give us money. That's your role in the greater scheme of things. And I think there's maybe... I'm sorry, go ahead.
They're playing on the stupidity of the American public. They're banking on it, if you'll excuse the pun.
Actually, I think it's a little bit of cognitive dissonance and denial. I think the people inside the banking industry and the government don't want to admit to themselves how close we are to going Cairo on them. And that is really going to be their final mistake, because they're going to go on pushing, because that puts more money in their pockets, and they don't see that line that stretches before them, where if they cross over it, the American people are going to say, look, this has gone far enough. It's time to deal with this. Tracy, stay with me through one more break, and we'll be back in about 5 minutes here. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We had a momentary glitch on our sound connection, so if it goes away again, call it a stray cosmic ray, and we'll play polka music for you until we get our connection back. Anyway, Tracy, I kind of want to wrap up with you here. We've both been expressing, I think, our incredible frustration. I am sure that you and I and pretty much everybody listening to this show, we are seeing people, good, hard-working people who have spent their lives playing by the rules, working within the system, and they're just now realizing that the system isn't interested in them over and above the money and work product they can extract and the soldiers that can be bred and sent off to die in wars of conquest. And I think more and more people, we're angry to see good people suffer while bad people just seem to get all the rewards of life. And I think it just offends our sense of justice, that we want good people, and we're not talking about being incredibly rich, and nobody's out here asking for a handout. We want back what we had before. We want the high-paying jobs we had before, and the homes and the financial security we had before Wall Street went off on this gambling binge and the mortgage-backed security fraud that ruined the economy of what used to be the greatest nation on earth. And they're all incredibly rich, and we're all incredibly poor, and they think that's just fine. And I think you'll agree with me that there is something fundamentally wrong with a government that allowed this to happen and did nothing to stop it. And I am tired of seeing good people hurting and bad people just thinking it's the funniest thing in the world that they wound up with all the money.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you have a better chance going to Vegas and playing with loaded dice. I mean, the system is rigged against the small guy.
Well, a little bit of rigging might have been tolerable, but at this point, the rigging has become so obvious. If you win, they take it from you and they give it. It's just completely insane. Now you've got Geithner saying that we can't let the government shrink, so we have to start taxing small businesses at higher rates. That's pretty much all that's left in this country. The big corporations have already taken most of their work to other countries. Now the small businesses bear the brunt of new job creation, and Geithner wants to tax them and put them over the edge into failure. I mean, did Goldman Sachs sell a credit default swap on the entire United States of America where they're all going to make trillions of dollars if they intentionally crash the system? You kind of have to wonder, what is the long-term thinking behind this stuff? But, of course, the answer is there's no long-term thinking. They're not thinking any further than the next election and the next dividend check, and that really has become a fundamental flaw in the way our society operates.
I agree. It's no long-term thought and just preserve the status quo. Let someone take care of it 10 years in the future, but by then, everyone's going to be bankrupt, including the country.
Yeah, the very nature of the Federal Reserve System is that it always makes sure there is more debt than there is available money. All of this debt they talk about that's out there, the trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, it's money that never existed. It's a bookkeeping entry. It's created out of thin air, much like the money itself, and used to enslave the people. Tracy, we're going to let you go here. Is there anything you want to say to our listeners in wrapping up?
Just keep your head up. I think that some sort of solution for the individual homeowner is around the corner. If you need any information whatsoever, please don't hesitate to call me.
All right, and your phone number one more time for those who are just getting their pencils.
It's 954-467-8180.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Tracy. We're going to have you back on the show somewhere down the road as we keep tabs on this situation. And, there has to be something that is going to help ordinary Americans because it just can't keep on going the way it is. We're already at a greater wealth inequality than they had in Egypt at the time Mubarak got his pink slip. So we're already overdue. I'm amazed that we have not had that happen in this country yet. Tracy, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And let's see, what are we going to talk about here? I've only got about a section and a half here. Okay, here's a good story. It turns out, we're getting this whole private prisons industry in the United States of America. These are prisons that are run not by the government, not by the police force, not by the federal government. They're private company prisons. And in many cases, they are paid tax dollars to basically incarcerate and control criminals, and they put them to work in these prison factories for pennies per hour. They get enough, after a days of work, they have enough to maybe buy themselves a package of cigarettes in the company store. It's slave labor. It's exactly like what the Nazis had in Germany. Slave labor. Throw them in jail, have them work on whatever needs to be worked on, give them enough money so that they can go to the prison store and get books and cigarettes and, they even had a bordello at Auschwitz. And it was slave labor. It was prison labor to support a tyrannical government, and we have it here in this country. And it turns out now that the lobbyists for the private prison industry have given $835,000 in donations to federal candidates since the year 2000, basically in the last decade, and $6 million in donations to state politicians in the last 5 election cycles. And as a result, and inevitably and understandably, we have a whole new raft of laws and sentencing guidelines where people get sent to jail on minor offenses. And they get sent to these prison factories, and they are put to work to make products that the prison industries will sell for, huge amounts of money in markup because their labor costs are practically nothing. And they're getting rich. And they share the money with Congress and the state legislators who say, well, yes, we need a law to put, how about, can we send jaywalkers to prison for a couple of years? Meanwhile, of course, up in Wall Street, you rip off your clients and, they may occasionally send somebody like Bernie Madoff to prison, but all the people behind the mortgage-backed security fraud, the people at Goldman Sachs, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, none of those people went to prison. Don't you think the punishment should match the crime? It's like I said earlier in the show, this homeless man stole $100, he got a 15-year prison sentence. These Wall Street barons stole trillions of dollars. Shouldn't their jail sentences prorate? Put these executives in these prison factories. I don't know what they'll do. It's not like they have any skills. Can't get paid for playing golf, I guess. All righty, let's see. If you thought that the month of May was a little chillier than you recall, you were absolutely correct. This is another thumb at the nose at Al Gore and his carbon Nazis. or carbonistas, or whatever we want to call them here this week. As a matter of fact, May was, in fact, much cooler. It was the 25th coldest May on record in the United States of America, and it was cooler than the last several preceding years. And I know the global warming people want to say, oh, it's warm in air. And I got a nasty email from one of the carbonazis the other day saying, haven't you seen all the tornadoes and the hurricanes and storms? That proves the world is getting warmer. No, what it proves is there's a temperature differential somewhere. Because you get hurricanes on Jupiter, where it's really cold compared to planet Earth. And you get tornadoes, dust devils really, on Mars. I used to work on Viking. We'd see the dust devils. We can see one of those dust devils actually saved one of the Mars rovers. It was so covered in dust the solar cells weren't working. Then one of those dust devils came over, showroom new, clean and shiny, batteries charged up, thing went just great. Yeah, it isn't the Earth getting warmer. It's the upper atmosphere getting colder that is making the severe weather. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I think the American nation is very much in decline, the government and the banking system. And not only that, I think Americans' pride in the country is all but gone. I remember when I was a kid growing up in New England, where the cradle of the revolution, it's not just American history, it's family history. You know, look what great-great-great-great-granddad did. And we have an interesting phenomenon we've noticed out here in Hawaii. Fireworks are still kind of sort of maybe legal. Not the way they were when we moved out here. They're slowly banning things. They don't want us to have experience handling things that explode, I guess. And there's a huge smuggling operation for fireworks every year. And we have fireworks 3 times a year. New Year's, boy, you should have seen 2000. What an amazing spectacle that was. Chinese New Year. And, of course, the 4th of July, which is coming up. And normally, starting a month ahead of these 3 holidays, the smugglers can't resist playing with some of the stuff they've brought in. And, you know, we'll see skyrockets going off every once in a while. And I noticed this year there aren't any. And I've noticed over the last several years that everybody will go nuts for New Year's and fireworks and Chinese New Year's and fireworks, but every year on Independence Day, it's a little bit more subdued. People just aren't enthusiastic about waving the flag anymore. And we all like fireworks and everything, but it's just like, why bother? There's nothing really to celebrate or honor anymore, because the nation we're living in right now, sure as heck, is not the one that was created in 1776. We have turned into the very sort of nation we fought a revolution to be free of. Private central bank, fiat currency, tyrannical government. And I'm not surprised when a moment's thought that we are not seeing a tremendous amount of enthusiasm for this Independence Day, because we've lost our independence. You know, we have to get naked before the government, before we're allowed to travel anywhere. And TSA is now going into shopping malls and bus stations and train stations. And as I said on yesterday's show, it's all about taking your dignity from you. There's no terrorists out there. They're all fakes. They're all phonies to sell you a war. TSA's job is to take your dignity and your pride away from you. That's why Napolitano can say, we're not going to bother scanning the container vessels coming in on the ships anymore. They know there's no threat coming in on those things. They don't need to secure the southern border with Mexico. Cheap labor, nothing else is coming over that border. TSA grabbing your crotch and making you get naked is all about taking your dignity and your pride. Look at ancient woodcuts or copper engravings or tomb paintings of ancient tyrants. And when their prisoners are brought before them, they're always naked. Because it strips them not just of their clothes, but of their pride and their dignity and their will to stand up and refuse. And that's what TSA's job is doing. Just like the Gestapo did in Nazi Germany. We're always watching you. We're peeking at you. I found pictures of Nazis opening up the clothes of people and peeking inside. So this is nothing new with what TSA is doing. The only thing new about TSA is they've got the scanners, which are going to give you cancer. And give them cancer. So, not much to feel good about with Independence Day, because we've lost our independence. We've become bizarro America. The Coinage Act of 1790, was that 92 or 97? My memory fails me on that one. Basically made debasing the currency a death penalty offense, and yet that is precisely what the Federal Reserve is doing right now. In order for the Federal Reserve to take over and hijack the country and make you their slaves, Congress had to deliberately, intentionally, with malice aforethought, change the laws to make what the Federal Reserve was doing the law of the land. Because it wasn't. It was illegal. It was illegal. Alrighty, over in Europe, getting back to this whole Al Gore thing, the European Union's budget chief has now started openly questioning global warming and saying maybe because of the European Union's own fiscal problems, they should not be putting any more money into global warming demands, research, whatever, because question marks are appearing over global warming. After 3 harsh winters, 3 record-setting winters, yeah, there are question marks over the whole situation. And apparently, Al Gore is now upset. You can't say that. Man, bear, pig is real. I want to tell you something about Al Gore. Al Gore is not a trained scientist. He is a politician. We have, over at the ClimateGate page, I have at my website, and I linked it up there so you can check it out for yourself. I've got a video of Al Gore saying that the interior temperature of the Earth is millions of degrees. And it isn't. It's a complete nonsensical statement. Back when Al Gore was campaigning for first vice president and actually president, there was this interesting story up in New Hampshire, and I heard about this because I have family up there. Al Gore, because he was even back then talking about the environment and the world and how much he loved the environment, he wanted a photograph for his campaign literature of himself paddling a canoe out in nature. And they got to where they were going to shoot the picture, and the lake was dry because New Hampshire was in the middle of a record-setting drought. And so Al Gore, Mr. I love the planet and I'm only thinking of what's best for Mother Earth, pulls a political favor and has them open a dam and just let go a huge amount of water in order to get enough water into this lake for him to float his canoe and get his picture for his campaign literature. And the water then just flows down and away and basically downstream, out of reach and no longer usable for agriculture. Because, like I said, they were in the middle of a record drought at that point. He doesn't care about the earth. He just cares about the money. And this is his issue. When Al Gore threw Florida to George W. Bush, George W. Bush said, we will let you loot the American people with carbon taxes and all this other nonsense, and you just go away and have fun with that, and you will get very rich. And he has. Al Gore has gotten very, very wealthy. Even before he bought this beachfront house, his home in Tennessee was this incredibly wasteful mansion. Had a huge carbon footprint. He doesn't walk his own talk. He doesn't live the environmentally friendly life he says you all should be doing. It's just a sales pitch. Don't get bowled by a Gore. That's what the T-shirt says. We sell these, by the way. It is green. And it says ClimateGate. Don't be bowled by a Gore. It's all Wizard of Oz thinking. We're going to create a crisis. Papier-mâché head doused in kerosene, set on fire. Woo! Scare you to go off and do battle with the Wicked Witch of the West. That's all it is. Our government has survived on lies and fraud so long, they don't know how to do anything else. They can't deal with a real crisis, like the Gulf oil disaster, Fukushima, the collapsing economy, the floods. All they can do is manufacture phony things for you to be afraid of. Osama bin Laden, carbon dioxide, global warming, killer bees, Y2K, the coming ice age. They were talking about that back in the 70s. It's just an endless stream of things you're supposed to be afraid of so that you run clinging to the government and give them your money and your freedom and do as you're told. And that's all it is. It's a hoax. And the government has repeatedly shown they can't deal with the real problems. SEC couldn't rein in Bernie Madoff. MMS couldn't enforce safety down there at the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig. The Bureau of Mine Safety was looking the other way when we had that disaster in the mine a while back. The Chilean miners got out. The American miners did not. And it just goes on and on. Bridges are collapsing. Roads are crumbling. All of our money is going to build nice new roads over there in Israel. It's just completely out of control. And I don't understand why you do not get angry. We evolved to have the capacity to feel anger. It's not there by accident. It serves some survival purpose. The ability to feel rage, to want to go out and confront those who threaten your well-being and that of your family and your friends and your village and your community and pummel them about the head with large wooden sticks. It's in there for a reason. It's coded into the DNA as a survival mechanism to keep you alive in the face of the predator that is coming to take your food, take your women, take your children. You need to own that. I know that hate gets a bad rap. Oh, you shouldn't hate. We're all happy little mushrooms. We never hate. Nonsense. Some hates are justified. I hate liars. I hate cheats. I hate con artists. I hate child molesters. Why don't you? It is okay to hate people who do hateful things. And I am tired of seeing people who do horrible, hateful things defend themselves by saying, oh, you just hate. We didn't do anything wrong. You just hate us. Yeah. I hate people who do bad things. And I'm proud of it. So, got to find that anger. It's time to find the anger. If you don't have any more pride in being an American, if you have no more pride in America, then it's time to find the anger at those who killed our nation. Because it didn't commit suicide. You and I, we've been struggling for years to try and hold our society together in the face of a government and a bunch of bankers who are simply there carving up the carcass of what used to be the greatest nation on earth and just trying to make sure that they get the biggest piece of meat shoved into their backpack, bigger than anybody else. They're fighting over the remains. And it wasn't even theirs to fight over. It's our country. They don't have a right to carve it up for themselves. They don't have a right to sell it off. They don't even have a right to pledge it as collateral on loans they made without our permission to finance wars that we didn't agree to. If we're going to be a free people, we have to recover the freedom to say no, because there is no freedom without the freedom to say no. And we need to stand up. We need to find the no. We need to be the America that can say no. And on that thought, have a good weekend. We'll be back Monday here on the Rents Radio Network. Until then, stay safe, stay well, stay angry, stay skeptical. Think about where you want this nation to go, and aloha, America.